Give me a sense of your perceptions on the markets, the bearish sentiment that we saw last week continuing into today.
Yeah, people quote what has happened as being the bears are back in the market. In fact, it's the profit takers. And we see this happen quite often in our market, which compared to global markets is a fairly thin market. We've had some good increases in a variety of the issues on the Nigerian stock exchange, and people look at that and say, well, we're beginning to learn that not all markets go straight up, so perhaps we'll take some profit. And so we saw that beginning in the middle of last week and going on to today, and it might continue for a little while, but my people say that it appears that there are orders being given to the stockbrokers to get back into the market toward the end of the week. We also have the situation with a lot of mutual funds who invest in the exchange, who by regulations from the SEC cannot have more than 5% of their net asset value in any one security. So if you have a run for a week or two of improved prices, then that puts them over their 5% and they have to move on to something else or take their profit. So I don't really see it as bearish, I just see it as profit taking.
Okay, let's talk about what's happened to one of the largest subsectors, the banks. I mean, they've taken quite a knock in the last week, and that's despite all the positive influence of AMCON mopping up non-performing loans and better valuations for banks. What do you expect to see regarding the banking subsector this week?
Well, the banking subsector, everybody has their eye on it, and of course there are a lot of people who back in 2008 got their fingers burnt by investing, maybe not with a great deal of wisdom, in some of the banks. I believe that now we're separating the strong banks from the ones that aren't so strong, and we're waiting to see really which form each individual bank is going to take. They can become regional banks, international banks, merchant banks, etc. But they're being followed very closely by wise investors.
Obviously, on that issue of new regulations, we've seen Access Bank apply for an international banking license, and obviously that's going to change the structure of that particular entity. What do you make of Access's move?
Well, all of the banks are looking to change their structure in one way or another with these new categories of banks. Access Bank is, in my estimation, a very forward-thinking group and has the advantage of having some very experienced bankers at the helm. I think it's well worth watching what Access Bank does because it is a valuable organization, in my estimation.
Okay, let's talk about other performers in other subsectors, particularly the food and beverage and also the building materials sector. We have seen some very good performance from the food and beverage sector, particularly the brewers, but again, them also submitting to pressures on the market in recent days.
Well, I think submitting to profit taking. You know, the food and beverage industry we like very much. We, of course, take a bottom-up approach to the companies in which we invest, and there's lots to choose from because we have to bear in mind there are 150 million people in Nigeria, and you don't really need to have a big percentage market share of 150 million people to have a lot of business. And so the good, strong food and beverage companies do very, very well, and I believe they will continue to do well as we move forward. But nothing ever goes straight up.
Okay, the one area where we're not seeing very good performance is in the currency market. The Naira also under pressure against the dollar. Has it something to do with the fundamentals of the Naira in Nigeria, or has it got to do with what we're seeing internationally?
It has to do with the fundamentals of the Naira/dollar in Nigeria. It has to do with the demand for dollars from time to time, and particularly when we're getting into an area of growth, The Nigerian companies that are importing things, and an awful lot gets imported here, are looking for the hard currency in order to pay for those imports. The change in the naira, or what might appear to be a weakness in the naira, ends up being reflected in the prices of basically food.
Okay, obviously the naira, the international oil price, the inflation outlook, all of those issues are correlated, and we are seeing the international price headed above the $100 a barrel mark, and that's got something to do with the situation in Egypt and fears about contagion in the Middle East and all of those kinds of global phenomenon. A good oil price should have a good bearing on Nigeria, but the tendency is that it doesn't happen. Why is that?
Well, it does happen. There is an awful lot of comfort taken by the markets in Nigeria when the price of oil is as high as it is. One should be buying oil now even at these levels. One certainly should have been buying it when it was down in the 40s. Realistically, this is somewhere around where oil is, or where oil should be in price. Nigeria definitely benefits from it.
I mean, some would argue that not quite, in the sense that the debt burden on Nigeria is that debt is 25% of the budget. They're having to, get into the crude oil account and into the reserves of the country to try to fund a lot of the public spending. And this obviously has a bearing on risk perceptions of investing in this economy. Your views on fiscal stability in Nigeria?
Well, we're getting into an area with that question which concerns politics and how the government is running the country and running the economy. And I'm a guest in Nigeria, and so I would rather not wade in on that. I will tell you, though, in my estimation, the Central Bank of Nigeria is doing an excellent job regulating what it should be regulating, monitoring how the currency is operating, monitoring inflation, and doing what it can do to ensure that inflation does not get higher and hopefully gets lower. So I think we can, in Nigeria, we can take a great deal of heart from what is happening at the central bank.
And very briefly on that positive sentiment then, trends for the markets going into 2011?
I am a fellow who thinks there's a lot of value in a lot of equities, a lot of companies in the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and I think there is good value in the fixed income markets as well.